Helldivers 2 has received its first big balance patch, the one ahead of the bigger stuff like mechs, potentially vehicles, and of course the new war bond and whatever crazy things the guys at Arrowhead are cooking up. But for now, what we've gotten is a lot of buffs and nerfs, and a lot of the community does not seem happy, especially if we are to believe sources like Twitter and Reddit. You might have already seen the patch notes, although they do feel a little bit different when you're playing in-game. The short version of the notes is that now there's a lot of environmental effects. You can get some meteor storms, you can get some tornadoes. I haven't seen those yet. You can get tremors, which are just annoying. And we're going to talk about this as well as all of the buffs and nerfs and why exactly people are complaining. And most of those complaints revolve around nerfs. The Breaker, the most popular shotgun, has been nerfed. The Railgun has been nerfed. And the Shield Pack has been nerfed. And people say that you shouldn't nerf things in a PvE game. You should only buff things. And I do think that nerfs can be warranted. You can't just blanket say that you should only buff things, because things have to work around the point of balance, and if your point of overall balance is way too high, then that does require a nerf and then buffs. So I think that crucifying the devs and saying that they don't know what they're doing, that they're heading in the wrong direction by doing any sort of nerf, is not the right way to look at it. Instead, what we should complain, what we should be very clear to them with, is that there aren't enough buffs to compensate for the nerfs. And the reason I think it's very important that we talk about these patches and about the overall philosophy of how they're going to balance the game is because, as they say themselves, this is the first in a never-ending wave of balance. The game will constantly have to be balanced to make sure that it's hitting the goals that they want it to hit, and they want to be fully transparent about it. So I think that community feedback is a really important part of keeping the game as fun as possible. And to accompany that, they even put out a blog post by Patrick Lasota, head of product testing over at Arrowhead, explaining the reason for some of these buffs and nerfs and what they actually want to achieve. So I'm going to quickly run down a lot of this patch and give some feedback, as well as then talk about the overall philosophy and where I think it's going wrong. It's not going as wrong as people are making it out to be, but I don't think it's going in the best direction possible. And yes, instead of just saying this good and this bad, I will be offering alternative solutions and what I think would be good balance adjustments. So I'm Monk Thief, I make a lot of videos about a lot of different video games. Make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss them. Let's get into it. So we have those new planetary hazards, you have meteors, you have fire tornadoes, I have not seen those, and you have the tremors, along with other crazy things that they say can be in the game, and I believe them. They put a lot of crazy stuff in this game and don't tell us sometimes. I find this interesting because it adds a lot of diversity and it helps make each and every deployment a little bit more special, a little bit more unique, something more memorable each time you dive. So I like the spectacle that these add, but I also think they need to be balanced further. This actually feels like a much bigger thing to introduce into the game and a whole new mechanic that's going to continue to evolve probably, to just kind of appear suddenly, and even puts more perspective on the balance stuff. Along with that, the Eradicate missions are now appropriately longer and more difficult and more chaotic. Good luck with automatons on 7 and above. I had a fun time on these, which before had kind of been boiled down to a science. Now it was a little bit more chaotic. But here we reach the really important part about the buffs and the nerfs and what the philosophy here is. And we're going to go very in-depth. I have gone out and tested every single one of the changes to tell you what I think about it, not just from the perspective of what you should use. I don't think that should ever be the central point for you playing this game. It should be to have fun. But I will tell you what's a good direction, what's a bad direction, and how this is all affecting the potential future of the game. Which, by the way, like I said, they do contextualize a lot of this in a blog post by Patrick Lasota, which I have down in the description if you want to go read. But I'm going to summarize basically what Patrick says about it when talking about it and showing my counterpoint. So the Breaker has its magazine capacity decreased from 16 to 13, and its recoil has been increased because it's just a little bit too strong. It's too versatile. It's a gun that you can use in pretty much every situation, and it's always the right choice. The magazine capacity can be felt, but I do think that with a little bit more of trigger control, you will still get the same efficiency out of a magazine. You're just going to have to get used to not holding down the trigger the same way, especially if you're very used to reloading when you have one bullet left. Well, that's different now. You got to get used to that new system, but it's still very strong. The big one, though, is the Railgun. With decreased armor penetration in safe mode and decreased damage against durable enemy parts, And we do have to combine this with the shield backpack, which has been nerfed. It has an increased delay before recharging, and we have to talk about these two in combination, because I don't know if you guys have played a lot of level 7, 8, or 9 difficulty missions, but you could go into a lobby and the entire crew was just carrying a shield backpack with a railgun. Everybody. There was no reason to run anything else. These were just too versatile, too useful in most of the situations, even with the downside of the railgun having only 20 ammo and not being the best at crowd control, being a 20 ammo single shot use weapon. You could overcome that with other stratagems, with other strategies, or just by using the breaker. And that combination meant that there wasn't a lot of variety in higher level lobbies. And some of the complaints that I agree with more, if you take away what was the best way to tackle these lobbies, you have to give other options that are equally viable. And at the moment, it feels like that just isn't there. They just took power away from what was the best option to really clear the higher level missions without giving appropriate substitutes for it. Now, I'm loyal to Super Earth, but I would say that maybe some people on the balance team, they're Team Terminate over there. Because while the railgun is not destroyed, and while it's equally as powerful and as versatile, especially if you're playing on level 5 or 6, which I do think now is the most fun, since the patch rolled out, I've been jumping between level 7 and 6 in my testing, and I just feel like I'm having a better time on 6, where before, I felt like the perfect point of challenge and fun and chaos was at 7. And that is partially because the railgun just doesn't run supreme. You can still have a very similar impact and versatility as long as you run the railgun in unsafe mode. And I think this is a smart decision. There should be some risk attached to the weapon for it to be as good as it is. And if you don't know what unsafe mode is, I've talked to some people in lobbies that just didn't know what that was. Hold down your reload button and switch it to unsafe. Now you can overcharge the railgun, and if you do overcharge it, it will blow up and you will find yourself respawning. So now instead of just holding the charge forever, hitting a place and doing a lot of damage, now you have to accurately predict when the gun will be at its max charge and make sure that you can hit your shot at that point without overcharging it. But even in the most basic scenarios, now to get that armor penetration effect or to have the same level of DPS output, you're going to have to be overcharging your gun all the time, which means that the overall fire rate is going to be lower, and that can be very much felt, especially on those higher difficulties. The idea to compensate for the railgun has been doing things like the flamethrower increasing its damage by 50%, which means that it is actually very good at taking down chargers now, but it's not good against Bile Titans and it's useless against automatons. The laser cannon, a weapon that has a lot of potential in my opinion, has increased damage against durable enemy parts, increased armor penetration, and improved ergonomics, which means it sways less. But it can't really go through charger armor and of course not very useful against Bile Titans. When it comes to potential replacements for the breaker, we have the Punisher, which now has more ammo and has increased stagger. It also has more damage, but what's really notable is the stagger. You can definitely stun lock enemies very easily now with it, and it's an interesting niche for the gun to be in. It is the gun you would now choose if you want to find space to then use your stratagems or reload your primary weapon or something like that. While still putting out pretty good damage, having very good ammo efficiency, you're never going to get caught with your pants down if you're running this because you can reload very fast and it will take down some of the more annoying threats that like to jump on you, and it will even stun lock stalkers. So it's good. This is a good direction. I think that finding niches for guns is good. It's just that the overall balance is still not where it's supposed to be. The Spray and Pray, the other version of the breaker, now has a little bit more damage and fire rate thanks to it having 16 pellets from shot, but its magazine has been decreased to keep it in line with the normal breaker. So let's really break down what the issue with this balance is. And instead of simply saying this balance is bad, I do want to offer actual balance ideas that I think would work better. So the problem with the railgun is that it is just too versatile, too strong against most of the threats in the game. And what it lacks is very easy to overcome with other things. So there's no reason to really specialize. At most, you might take somebody with a grenade launcher, which is the other strongest weapon in the game in my opinion. It is also very versatile, it's great at crowd control, anything that's unarmored you can take down very quickly, and it's very good for objectives. But aside from that, you really only want to take the railgun at this point. By taking away some of that power of the Railgun, you also took away some of its identity, because it's meant to be this really strong chargeable weapon that can take down the biggest threats with a well-placed shot. And while some of that identity is still retained by using unsafe mode, its overall power level has been decreased. And that leaves a vacuum where you don't have a way to really cover for that unless you start running javelins, expendable anti-tank missiles, along with a flamethrower and a grenade launcher or something like that. And even then, you're still going to have to compensate for stratagems. And if that's what they're going for, yeah, they're moving in the right direction, but I think that isn't the most fun direction. The problem with overbuffing other things to compensate would be what Patrick talks about in the blog post, which is you take away the fantasy and the identity of some of these weapons. So if you don't have something that has the armor penetration of the Railgun, you have to put it into somewhere else. And what are you going to do? Put it into the autocannon? Now suddenly the autocannon is the best weapon in the game because it can take down chargers and bile titans while ignoring or punching through the armor? You end up with the same problem. The balanced solution that I personally prefer for the Railgun is to limit its efficiency at how quickly it can deal with enemies without taking risks. I would revert its ability to punch through armor, but require a much higher charge time when in safe mode, so that to punch through armor, you have to actually take the time to charge up that shot and make it go where it's meant to go. This would also mean it's still viable to work as a sniper against the bigger enemies for the one-shot potential, but you have to not only position very well, charge it up, and then hit your shot, making it a very big time commitment. Now, if you're dealing with 4 or 5 chargers at the same time, like you frequently are when you're playing on the higher difficulties, you don't have the time to do that. It would just be a completely unviable weapon. So you should make it charge much faster in unsafe mode. So that if you are good at not overcharging, if you can nail the timing on it, you can consistently get the same damage output as before, but if you slip up, you die. In my opinion, a change like this would keep the gun very fun in the lower difficulty levels and add a skill gap into using it correctly on the higher difficulties. Would it still be very strong? Yes. Would it be less so and lead to more variety? Also yes, just by the fact that many people would probably not enjoy the slow charge up speed or would get frustrated at how many times they blow themselves up. Similarly, I think that other buffs are warranted. I think that the laser cannon could punch through medium, even heavy armor if, for example, applying concentrated fire on a specific point, leading to more of those skill gap requirements, where you have to keep it on point through its sway and for an extended period of time to have it still be efficient against the bigger targets that now are more dangerous with the Railgun not being as good, while still retaining its primary benefit of being this machine gun style thing that you can just sweep a battlefield over and never have to reload or worry about resupplying. Another buff that I would have liked to see is having the anti-material rifle, the sniper rifle, have a little bit more penetration. Again, maybe not the same as the Railgun, that would be ridiculous, but yes, if concentrating fire, breaking through armor of things easier, but requiring that pinpoint precision to do so. But we don't see those sort of things, we just see this power vacuum, where the strongest thing in the game is now gone, there is no new center point of balance, and instead we're all scrambling to figure out what we have to do, and that might make us change our playstyles more than we want to. Balance is always a question of pros and cons, of trade-offs. You take a grenade launcher and you can take down a lot of enemies, you can deal with massive crowds, you can take out objectives, but you can't take down armor. So if you take the Railgun, you can take down armor only in unsafe mode, but if you take the sniper rifle or the energy cannon, what are you really doing? And I'm just using these as examples, but if you take the sniper rifle, you can't take out a large group of enemies, but you also can't focus fire down big targets. You still need to find their weak point. Same thing with the laser cannon, which is decent, worse than most primary weapons than your shotguns and machine guns that you can just take with you all the time at dealing with crowds, but it's not that good at anything that isn't taking down medium armor targets at the moment. And it's not even as good as other things even after being buffed. I think that by adding more versatility through skill gaps in how you can use these weapons, you can make them have better spots in what people can use them for, and still have plenty of choice in people running things that they want to run instead of being forced into running a specific thing because otherwise they get kicked from lobbies, or so it seems, according to a lot of people complaining that they got kicked from lobbies from not using the meta weapons. If the end goal is variety, everything needs to be a little bit more flexible. The biggest problem for me with changing the balance point of the game is that it now requires a lot more cooperation. You need to actually communicate with the rest of your team and make sure that you're taking the appropriate loadouts in order to tackle all of the different things that you are going to have on the mission. And that isn't always the case in a public lobby. And I think that part of the magic of this game is that as chaotic and crazy as it could be, you could clear level 7, 8, and even 9 difficulty level missions with a public lobby that wasn't strictly coordinated, that wasn't always communicating, that didn't go in with a plan, but you could still pull through. And I feel that by changing some of this balance, you're incentivizing that cooperation to be necessary. That is something that you can do. That is a decision that you can make. We don't want people to clear higher level difficulties without being able to communicate. But the problem is, they could before. What I would recommend is that if you want lobbies that need coordination and communication to exist, you should start implementing the even higher difficulty levels sooner rather than later. But you shouldn't take away the ability that people had to play through these higher difficulty missions as they were before. It's good to nerf the Railgun. It's good to retune it. But there needs to be more viable options for people to still play the game in that slightly uncoordinated way and make it through some of the tougher things that they could before, because people don't like it when you take stuff away. Along with this, just to mention it, there's a ton of fixes. Many of them make me very happy. Things like destroying certain bug holes, the flashlight looks cooler, some of the crazy visibility that happened on Errata Prime is gone, the ICBMs now blow you away, which is really fun. They haven't fixed some of the more annoying ones, for example, the one where if you pick up multiple things in quick succession, in a bunker or in a cache, one of them you just can't pick up. That's really annoying when there's 2 super credits in the same bunker and I really want the helmet that's in the store today, but hey, they'll get to it, I guess. It's just good to see a patch, to see them thinking about stuff and working on it. But since they're being so transparent with their process, I want to put out my 2 cents because I want the game to be the best that it can for a long time. I'm really excited for the big updates. I will be covering them, so remember to subscribe. But I do think that giving developers feedback like this is important, and they have shown that they do listen to what we have to say out here on the internet. So let me know what you think about the current situation, what you think about my ideas for balance, for patches. Tell me absolutely anything related to Helldivers down below. Remember that the Ministry of Truth of Super Earth forces you to like this video in the case that you like this video, and if you don't do it, it's a cause for treason. I've been Mug Thief. I'm going to continue testing the patch, see how it goes. If anything crazy happens, I'll be sure to let you know. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you again very soon.